"Get these bastards out of my sight and damn you in your wheelchair," Yasmin shrieked, her face disfigured by rage, as she yanked a 5-carat diamond ring from her finger and hurled it violently against Ikon's bandaged chest. The metal struck directly on a rib. Ikon didn't flinch. He remained motionless on the enormous bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, his gaze fixed on the woman who, just a week ago, swore to love him more than life itself. Now, seeing him prostrate, supposedly unable to walk after his private jet accident, the mask of the perfect wife had shattered in record time. Only 3 days had passed since he returned from the hospital, and Yasmin was already demanding total control of his offshore bank accounts and the shares in his mining conglomerate. He stayed silent. His brain has atrophied too, it seems. Yasmin paced back and forth across the luxurious master bedroom, her designer heels echoing against the Italian marble floor. "Look at you, the great Econ Tonali, the business shark, turned into a useless piece of furniture. I'm not going to waste my best years wiping your drool. Ikon, sign the damned power of attorney right now." At that instant, the door opened timidly. It was Lerato, the young domestic worker. She wore her impeccable blue uniform, with small white details on the collar, and her inseparable yellow gloves folded in her apron pocket. In her arms, she carried one of the twins, Thabo. With her other hand, she held Sifo's hand. The 2-year-old children watched the scene with wide eyes, startled by the screams. "Sir, excuse me," Lerato whispered, lowering her head and trying to become invisible. "I heard a noise, and the children got scared. They wanted to see their daddy." Yasmin spun on her heels like a cobra ready to strike. Her perfect blonde hair rippled with the abrupt movement as she pointed a finger at Lerato, her bright red manicure gleaming under the crystal chandelier. "Who gave you permission to enter here, you presumptuous servant?" She advanced towards Lerato. Lerato recoiled a step, instinctively shielding the children with her body. "And take these creatures away from here. They smell of poverty. I've told you 1,000 times I don't want to see Ikon's bastards lurking around my room." Ikon felt a volcanic fury rise in his throat, but he clenched his teeth until his jaw ached. He needed to endure. He needed to see how far the moral decay of that woman would go. He closed his fists under the blanket, hiding the strength he still possessed. "Yasmin, my children," Ikon said, feigning a weak, hoarse voice. "Let them stay. Lerato just looks after them." "Shut up," she interrupted, grabbing a porcelain vase from the bedside table and flinging it against the wall, inches from Lerato's head. The twins burst into tears. "I'm fed up. Fed up with this house. Fed up with these children who aren't even mine. And fed up with you. If you don't sign the papers by tomorrow morning, I swear I'll send you to the cheapest, most miserable old age home I can find." She pointed at Lerato with absolute contempt. "And this one, this starving wretch, will be out on the street with her children." Lerato, trembling, not for herself but for the children, armed herself with a courage she didn't know she possessed. She looked up and said in a shaky but firm voice, "Ma'am, please, Sir Ikon needs his rest. If you want to shout at me, do it outside, but respect his pain." The silence that followed was sepulchral. Yasmin's mouth dropped open in disbelief. The domestic worker was challenging her. Yasmin let out a cold laugh, devoid of any human joy. "Respect. You speak to me of respect." She approached Lerato until she invaded her personal space, spitting the words in her face. "You are a simple domestic worker. You are here to clean, not to give opinions. And you, Ikon?" She turned with a sneer. "Look who defends you, your great empire reduced to this. A domestic worker and 2 crying children. How pathetic." Yasmin walked to the door, but before leaving, she paused and looked at Ikon with a chilling coldness. "Tomorrow the notary arrives at 9 a.m. If you don't sign, say goodbye to your medical treatment. I'll cancel all payments. We'll see how long you last without your expensive medicines." She slammed the door so hard that the window panes vibrated. Lerato exhaled the breath she had been holding. Her legs wavered, but she remained firm for the children. She approached the bed slowly, her eyes brimming with suppressed tears. "Forgive me, sir. Ikon, I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said, quickly wiping tears from Thabo's cheeks. "I just don't like the way she talks to you. Sir, you don't deserve that." Ikon looked at the young woman. Unlike Yasmin, who saw only figures and status, Lerato saw the human being. Lerato, who earned a minimum wage, who wore the same uniform every day, who cared for his children as if they were her own, ever since their biological mother had died in childbirth. She had more dignity in her little finger than Yasmin in her entire surgically enhanced body. "Don't apologize, Lerato," Ikon said, using his true tone. before remembering the role he was playing. Thank you for defending the children. Do you need anything, sir? Water? Shall I adjust your pillows? Ekon nodded slightly. The test had barely begun. He needed to know if Lerato was truly loyal, or if she was merely acting out of fear of losing her job. Water, please. My throat is dry. Lerato placed the children on the rug, handing them some toys she took from her apron to keep them calm, and hurried to serve water from the crystal carafe. Her movements were quick and efficient. She carefully brought the glass to his lips, supporting his head as if it were fragile glass. The touch of her hand, rough from hard work, yet warm and gentle, contrasted brutally with the cold diamond ring Yasmin had flung at him minutes earlier. Ekon drank slowly. As he drank, he observed Lerato's worn shoes. She sent almost all her money to her ailing mother in a remote village in the Eastern Cape. She never complained, never asked for an advance, and now she had faced the mistress of the house for him. Lerato, he said, returning the glass. If Yasmin takes everything from me, what would you do? Lerato looked at him, surprised by the question. Sir, money comes and goes. My grandmother used to say that a man's wealth is not in his pocket, but in who stays by his side when his pocket is empty. She paused, looking at the twins on the rug. I wouldn't leave you alone, sir. And the boys, Thabo and Sifo, I would never abandon, even if I had to sell vetkoek in the street to feed them. Ekon felt a lump in his throat. This was the answer. This was the truth he sought. But destiny, cruel and capricious, was about to put that promise to the test in the most brutal way possible. The door opened again. This time, Yasmin didn't come alone. She carried a black leather briefcase in her hand and a smile that boded no good. Behind her entered Zola, Ekon's junior business partner, a man Ekon had always considered a fawning, harmless parasite. How wrong he had been. Zola wore an impeccable Italian suit and carried a bottle of Dom Perignon in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. Good evening, Sleeping Beauty, Zola exclaimed, laughing as he entered and kissed Yasmin passionately on the lips. Right in front of Ekon's bed. How's the city's most expensive vegetable? Just as useless as ever, Yasmin replied, returning the kiss with exaggerated lasciviousness, making sure Ekon was watching. But don't worry, my love, tonight, as soon as the notary arrives. Ekon slowly opened his eyes. To see his partner kissing his wife in his own room while they plotted to rob him was psychological torture designed to the millimeter. Zola, Ekon murmured in a hoarse voice, you were my friend. I gave you a job when no one else would. Zola let out a laugh and approached the bed, leaning over Ekon. The smell of cheap cologne and alcohol assaulted the millionaire's nose. Business is business, Ekon. You're finished. Look at you, you're a dead weight. I've always hated you. Always so perfect, so moral. You sicken me. Zola turned and poured a glass for Yasmin. They clinked glasses, making the crystal chime right above Ekon's head. To the new owner of the Tonali conglomerate, Yasmin toasted, and to freedom, Zola replied. At that moment, Lerato entered with a tray, clean sheets, and a chicken broth for Ekon, as she had promised. Seeing Zola and the toast scene, she stopped instantly, horrified. What's happening here? Zola turned and looked her up and down with a sneer of displeasure. And who is this? The famous domestic worker who defends the cripple. He took a step towards her, invading her space. Hey, pretty one, when this one dies or goes to the old age home, you can stay. We need someone to clean up after the parties. Lerato recoiled. Her eyes flashed with indignation. Have some respect. Sir Ekon is ill, not dead. Please, leave. He needs to rest. Yasmin quickly approached and slapped the tray. The bowl of broth flew and shattered on the floor, splattering Lerato's uniform and the Persian rug. You don't give orders in my house, you stupid girl. Clean this up right now and get ready, because when the notary arrives, you're going to be a witness. I want you to see your dear employer sign his own sentence and leave you on the street. Ekon watched Lerato kneel to pick up the broken ceramic pieces. Her hands trembled, but not from fear, from impotence. He could see in her eyes that she was calculating, thinking of how to save him. Don't do anything, Lerato. Don't put yourself in danger for me. And what will they do with the children? Lerato asked from the floor, without looking up, as she gathered the shards. Zola and Yasmin exchanged a complicit, cruel look. Ah, the bastards, Zola said, taking a sip of champagne. I have a contact near the border, an orphanage, let's say, unofficial. They pay well for healthy, light-haired children. We get rid of the problem and even make some extra cash for the honeymoon. Ekon's heart stopped for a second. Then it began to pound with the force of a pneumatic hammer. They were going to sell his children. It was no longer just about money. They were monsters. The fury he felt was so intense that his fingers dug into his palms until they bled under the blanket. Lorato rose abruptly with a sharp ceramic shard still in her hand. "Over my dead body!" she screamed, completely forgetting her role as a domestic worker. "You won't touch those children. They belong to Sir Ikon." Zola laughed as if he were watching a chihuahua yapping at a hyena. "How cute. Do you think you can stop us?" He checked his watch. "The notary arrives in 10 minutes. After the signing, we'll take care of you and the brats. Yasmin, call security to bring the car to the front. Tonight we clean house." Ikon closed his eyes. 10 minutes. He had 10 minutes to prepare. He needed the notary to be present. He needed the crime to be blatant, with legal witnesses, to sink them into prison for the rest of their lives. "Lorato," Ikon called softly. "Go, take the children to their room. Lock yourselves in." "But, sir," Lorato looked at him in despair. "Do as I say," he ordered, placing special emphasis on the words, trying to convey a message with his gaze. "Trust me." Lorato held his gaze for a few seconds. She understood there was a plan, or at least a desperate plea. She nodded, swallowing her tears, and left the room almost running. Yasmin laughed. "See, Ikon, even your faithful little dog knows when she's lost." Lorato descended the stairs with her heart in her throat. She didn't go directly to the children's room. She knew that locking the door wouldn't stop two men like Zola and the bought-off security guards. She needed to buy time. She needed to do something. She went to the kitchen, her territory. There, among the pots and knives, she felt a little safer, but her hands wouldn't stop trembling. "They're going to sell the children." That phrase echoed in her mind like a fire alarm. She looked at the chef's knife block on the granite counter. Would she be capable? No, she wasn't violent. But for Thabo and Sifo, for those boys who called her Mama when no one was listening, she would be capable of transforming into a lioness. Suddenly, she heard heavy footsteps in the corridor. It was Yasmin. She was coming to get more ice for the champagne, humming a cheerful tune, completely oblivious to the pain she was causing. Lorato wiped her tears with the back of her hand and planted herself in the middle of the kitchen, blocking the way to the refrigerator. Yasmin entered with the empty glass in her hand and stopped when she saw the domestic worker standing there with a fixed, defiant gaze. "What are you doing standing there like a scarecrow? Get out of the way. I need ice." "No," Lorato said. Her voice sounded strange, deep, charged with an authority she had never used. Yasmin blinked in surprise. "Excuse me, what did you say?" "I said no." Lorato took a step forward. "I won't give you ice. I won't let you keep celebrating Sir Ikon's misfortune. You are a wicked woman, ma'am Yasmin. God is watching." Yasmin let out an incredulous laugh, throwing the glass onto the kitchen island with a dry thud. "God, you speak to me of God. He doesn't exist in this postcode, darling. Here, money rules, and the money is going to be mine. So get out of my way before you regret being born. I won't leave, and I won't let you take the children. I'm calling the police right now." Lorato reached into her apron to grab her old cell phone. It was a mistake. Yasmin, with quick reflexes fueled by adrenaline and malice, slapped the phone out of her hand and threw it forcefully against the wall on the other side. The device shattered. "Nobody is calling anyone," Yasmin shrieked. Then, she raised her hand and unleashed a brutal, resounding slap across Lorato's cheek. The sound of skin against skin echoed in the empty kitchen like a gunshot. Lorato's head spun with the impact, and her cheek immediately began to burn, turning red. Lorato brought her hand to her face, suppressing a sob, but didn't move an inch from her position. "Hit me if you want," Lorato said, looking at Yasmin with unshakable dignity. "Kill me if you want, but I won't let you hurt this family. You don't know what love is, ma'am. You are empty inside." Yasmin raised her hand to strike her again, blinded by rage at being challenged by someone she considered inferior. But before she could strike a second time, the sound of the main doorbell interrupted the violence. "The notary," Yasmin said, lowering her hand and regaining her cold composure. "You're saved by the bell, servant. But don't think this ends here." She adjusted her hair and left the kitchen, pushing Lorato with her shoulder as she passed. "Go upstairs right now," she ordered without looking back. "You'll be a witness, whether you like it or not. And if you open your mouth to say anything off script, the twins will suffer the consequences." Lorato remained alone in the kitchen for a moment, breathing agitatedly. Her cheek hurt, but her soul ached more. She looked at the ceiling, as if she could see through the walls to Ikon lying on the bed. Upstairs, in the master bedroom, Ikon had heard everything. He had activated the baby monitor. Lorato usually used to watch the twins, which she had casually left on in the kitchen. He heard the confrontation, He heard the slap. He heard the threat. Ikon was sitting on the edge of the bed. His legs, strong and functional, were firmly planted on the floor. His fists were white from tension. She hit her, he whispered to himself. She hit her for defending me. It was enough. The original plan was to wait for Yasmin to sign the fraud to have definitive legal proof. But this had gone too far. They had touched Lerato. They had threatened his children. The bedroom door opened. Zola entered first, followed by a short, bald, sweaty man carrying a briefcase. The corrupt notary, Mr. Nkosi. Behind them entered Yasmin, smiling triumphantly. And finally, Lerato, her cheek red and swollen, walking like a condemned woman. Ikon quickly returned to his invalid position, leaning back and covering his legs. "Here we are," Zola announced, rubbing his hands. "Doctor, proceed. Let's make this quick. We have a dinner reservation, and the invalid needs his beauty sleep." The notary approached the bed, pulling out documents filled with legal jargon and a golden pen. He didn't even look at Ikon. "Sir Tonali," the notary said in a monotone voice, "I need you to sign here, here, and here. It's a total cession of rights and assets in favor of your wife, Yasmin Tonali, due to your permanent physical and mental incapacitation." "I can't move my hand well," Ikon said, buying the last few seconds. "I wanted everyone to be in the room. I wanted to see their faces." "Don't worry, my dear," Yasmin said, approaching with a poisonous sweetness. "I'll help you." She grabbed Ikon's hand, the hand that had built skyscrapers, and forced the pen between his fingers. Then, she began to press his hand against the paper. "Sign, Ikon, sign, and it will all be over," Lerato murmured from the corner of the room. "Don't do it, sir. Shut up," Zola yelled. The tip of the pen touched the paper. Ikon felt the pressure of Yasmin's hand on his. He felt Zola's repulsive presence beside him. He felt Lerato's fear, and then he smiled. It was a small, almost imperceptible smile, but chilling. A smile that didn't belong to a defeated man. "You're right, Yasmin," Ikon said in his natural, potent, deep voice, abandoning the hoarse tone of an invalid. "It all ends here." Yasmin froze. Zola frowned. The notary stopped breathing. Ikon's hand, which was supposedly atrophied, closed around Yasmin's wrist with a crushing force. "Let go of me. You're hurting me," Yasmin screamed, pulling her arm desperately. Ikon sharply opened his hand, releasing her as if her skin burned. Yasmin stumbled backward, falling onto Zola's lap, rubbing her wrist, where red marks from her husband's fingers were already beginning to appear. "Are you crazy?" she shrieked, her eyes wide. "Did you see that? He almost broke my bone. He's an animal. He's dangerous." The notary, Mr. Nkosi, wiped the sweat from his trembling forehead with a handkerchief. "Mrs. Tonali, if the gentleman refuses to sign and demonstrates aggression, perhaps we should postpone this. The law is clear about coercion." "With the law," Zola interrupted, standing up and adjusting his suit jacket. "We don't need the signature if we declare he's a danger to himself and others. Yasmin, call security. My patience has run out. If he doesn't sign nicely, we'll drag him out of here like the trash he is." "Security," Yasmin yelled into the intercom on the wall. "Everyone to the master bedroom now." Seconds later, 4 burly uniformed men entered the room. Leading them was the head of security, Mandla, a man Ikon considered loyal. "Sir, what happened?" Mandla asked, looking confused at the scene. Yasmin pointed at Ikon. "Mandla, get this man out of my house. He became violent, he attacked me, and take the domestic worker and the children out into the street too." Mandla blinked in disbelief, looking at Ikon. "But ma'am, it's Sir Ikon. It's his house. It's raining heavily outside." "It's no longer his house," Zola intervened, approaching Mandla and slipping a wad of notes into his shirt pocket. "As of tomorrow, I'm the new administrator. If you want to keep your job, do as I say. Get them out now or you'll be out on the street too." Mandla hesitated. He looked at the money. He looked at Ikon prostrate on the bed. Greed and fear shone in his eyes. He lowered his gaze. "Sorry, Sir Ikon," Mandla murmured. "I have a family to support." Ikon nodded slightly, with a disappointment that weighed more than his feigned paralysis. "Don't worry, Mandla. Do what you have to do, but remember this moment well." What followed was a scene of absolute cruelty. The security guards, avoiding eye contact with their former boss, lifted him from the bed with brutality. Ikon let his body go limp, offering no resistance. They sat him in an old, rusty wheelchair they brought from the storage room. Lerato ran towards him, trying to cover him with a blanket. "Have pity," she cried out as Yasmin laughed. "That blanket is cashmere. Leave it there," Yasmin ordered, Don't take anything of value." Lorato, with tears in her eyes, took off her own cheap wool coat and placed it over Econ's shoulders. Then, she picked up Sifo and held Thabo's hand. "Come, sir." "I'm here," she whispered, her voice broken. The procession descended the main stairs. Yasmin and Zola followed from the balcony, glasses in hand, enjoying the spectacle like Roman emperors, watching Christians being thrown to the lions. As they reached the main door, Mandla opened it. The sound of the storm entered forcefully. The wind howled, and the rain fell like curtains of ice. A high-veiled summer storm, one that comes suddenly and doesn't ask permission. "Out!" Yasmin shrieked from above. "And don't approach my property again, or I'll call the police for trespassing." Mandla pushed the wheelchair to the end of the access ramp and left them there under the torrential downpour. "Forgive me, boss," Mandla said before running back inside and closing the heavy oak door. The thud of the door sounded like a final shot. They were alone. The darkness of the night was only cut by lightning. Econ, sitting in the old chair, felt the icy water soak his clothes in seconds. The twins began to cry loudly, terrified by the thunder and the cold. But then, he felt arms wrap around him. They were not arms of defeat. They were Lorato's arms. She didn't run for shelter. The first thing she did was embrace him and the children, creating a human shield against the rain with her own fragile body. "It's okay, don't worry, Sir Econ," she shouted to be heard over the wind. "I won't let you get sick. Come on. There's a bus stop down the hill. We'll take refuge there." Lorato positioned herself behind the wheelchair. Her shoes slipped on the wet asphalt. The old chair had locked wheels, but she pushed. She pushed with a force born of pure love, not for the millionaire, but for the human being. Her muscles tensed, her feet bled inside her cheap shoes, but she didn't stop. Econ, head bowed to protect himself from the water, felt an emotion he had never experienced with all his millions. He was being saved, truly saved. They reached the small concrete structure of the bus stop. It was dirty and graffitied, but the roof protected them from the direct rain. Lorato braked the chair and ran to sit the children on the concrete bench, taking some small chocolates she had kept in her pocket. "Look, my darlings, it's an adventure," she told the twins, wiping their little faces with her cold hands. "Eat this. It's all right. Daddy's here. I'm here." Then she turned to Econ, knelt on the dirty ground in front of him, taking his cold hands in hers to warm them. "Sir," she said, looking at him with mascara running from the rain, but with a gaze of steel, "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you before." Econ looked at her. The moment of truth had arrived, but it wasn't he who was going to speak first. The sound of rain hitting the zinc roof of the bus stop created a bubble of acoustic isolation. The world of luxuries, betrayals, and lies had been left behind, high up on the hill, inside the illuminated mansion. Down here, in the darkness and cold, only the truth existed. "Sir," Lorato said, taking a deep breath, "I know you're not paralyzed." Econ's world stopped for a second. The thunder that rumbled in the distance seemed insignificant compared to that confession. "What?" he asked, genuinely surprised. He had fooled the best doctors with bribes. He had fooled his wife, his partners. How could she know? "I've known for 3 days, Lorato continued, speaking quickly, as if needing to get the secret off her chest. "The night you came back from the hospital, I entered the room to clean when I thought you were asleep. I saw you move your legs. I saw you stretch. At first, I was scared. I thought it was a miracle. But then I saw you looking at a photo of Mam Yasmin with an expression of sadness and calculation." Lorato squeezed his hands harder. "I understood that you were testing her, that you were looking for something that money can't buy. The truth. That's why I said nothing. That's why I pretended to believe her when she insulted you. That's why I discarded the fake medicines you spat into the napkin when you thought no one saw. I threw them away so she wouldn't find them." Econ remained silent. He felt an oppression in his chest, but this time it was of pure gratitude. All this time, he thought he was alone in the trenches, observing the enemy, but he wasn't. He had an ally in the shadows, a guardian angel in yellow gloves. "Why?" Econ asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Why didn't you betray me? Yasmin would have paid you a fortune for that information. You could have left, helped your mother." Lorato shook her head. A sad but dignified smile appeared on her lips. "Money from betrayal is cursed money, sir. It runs out quickly and leaves the soul dirty." She paused, looking at the concrete bench where the twins ate the chocolates, oblivious to the adult drama. "And it's for them, for the children." Lorato reached into her clothes, pulling out a hermetic plastic envelope she had kept taped to her skin to protect it from the rain. "A month before your accident, Mam Yasmin was talking on the phone. She was drunk. She dropped this." Lorato handed him the envelope. These are the results of a DNA test she did in secret. Ikon took the envelope with hands that no longer feigned weakness. He opened it under the faint light of the street lamp. It was an official document from a genetic laboratory. Paternity results. Excluded. Mother, Yasmin Tonali. Father, unknown. Ikon frowned in confusion. I don't understand, Lorato. Thabo and Sifo are my biological children. My first wife died in childbirth, but I know they are mine. Keep reading, sir, Lorato said softly. Ikon turned the page. There was another document, a maternity test. Maternity result excluded. Ikon looked up, astonished. These papers aren't for Thabo and Sifo, sir, Lorato explained. They're for a pregnancy Mam Yasmin had 2 years ago, right when the twins were born. She told you she lost the baby, but she didn't lose it. Lorato took a deep breath. The baby was born, only it wasn't yours. It was Zola's. She gave the child up for illegal adoption, so you would never know about the infidelity. Ikon felt nauseous. Yasmin was not just ambitious. She was a monster. She had abandoned her own child to maintain her status as a millionaire's wife. I kept this because I knew that one day she would try to hurt you or the children, Lorato said. She hates Thabo and Sifo because they remind her that she is a mother, but a mother who gave her child away. They are living proof of her moral failure. Sir, she never loved you, never. Ikon put the papers in the inside pocket of his suit jacket, looked at the woman in front of him, a woman who had nothing, but who had just given him the most powerful weapon in the world, the truth. Ikon leaned forward. For the first time in months, his eyes gleamed with the fire of Ikon Tonali, the man who dominated business. But this time the fire was tempered by an infinite tenderness. Lorato, he said, raising a hand to touch her red, swollen cheek. Stand up. She obeyed, confused. Ikon removed the blanket from his legs, placed his feet on the ground, gripped the edges of the wheelchair, and, with a fluid, powerful movement, stood up. His imposing height seemed to fill the small bus stop shelter. Lorato covered her mouth with her hands, although she already knew he could do it. To see him upright, strong, imposing, was different. The game is over, Ikon said. I have what I needed. I know who my enemy is. And most importantly, he looked at her with an intensity that left no doubt. I know who my companion is. Ikon took off his suit jacket, which was dry inside, and placed it over Lorato's shoulders. Sir, what are you going to do? She asked, trembling. We're going back, he said, looking up the hill where the mansion stood like a dark castle, and I'm going to clean my house. But before they could take a step, headlights cut through the darkness. A black sports car sped down the hill and braked, screeching, in front of the bus stop. The window rolled down. It was Zola, and next to him, Yasmin with a crazy smile. Look at them, Yasmin shrieked, not seeing that Ikon was standing, as he had quickly sat down at the sight of the lights. What a pathetic sight. They look like drowned rats. Zola laughed. We came because the notary says that, on second thought, he needs a fingerprint, even if it's in the presence of external witnesses, to validate the Emergency Incapacitation Act. Then, Zola pulled a pistol from the glove compartment. Either you give me your finger nicely, or I'll put a bullet in the domestic worker right here, and we'll say it was a robbery. Nobody will investigate the death of a poor wretch. Yasmin got out of the car with the document in hand, shielding herself from the rain with a designer umbrella. Last chance, Ikon. Sign or she dies. Lorato interposed herself between the gun and Ikon, spreading her arms wide. No, she screamed. Don't touch him. Sir Ikon, he will sign, but lower the gun, please. There are children here. Yasmin, protected under the umbrella, approached Ikon, taking advantage of Lorato being paralyzed by Zola's gun. Listen to your domestic worker, my dear, Yasmin whispered in Ikon's ear, grabbing his left hand violently. She's smarter than you. Now give me that finger. Yasmin pulled an ink pad from her jacket pocket. The rain threatened to ruin everything, so she leaned over him, covering the paper with her own body. Zola, keep the gun steady. Ikon let his hand go limp, flaccid. He needed them to trust him. He needed them to believe he had been defeated. Yasmin pressed Ikon's thumb against the black ink and then, with brute force, stamped it against the document resting on the rigid briefcase. It's done, Yasmin shouted triumphantly, lifting the sheet to check the print under the faint light of the street lamp. Perfect. It's all mine. It's ours, Zola. But in that instant of distraction, while Yasmin celebrated victory and Zola lowered the gun a few centimeters to look at the paper, Lorato saw her opportunity. She wasn't a fighter, she didn't know martial arts, but she was a mother in everything but blood, and a mother defends. Lorato quickly crouched down, grabbed a handful of gravel and mud from the ground, and threw it with all her strength at Zola's face. Ah! Zola howled, letting go of the gun for a second to bring his hands to his eyes, blinded by the dirt and pain. The pistol fell onto the wet asphalt, sliding towards the street. The gun. Get the gun, Yasmin. Zola screamed, stumbling blindly. Yasmin, reacting out of pure survival instinct, dropped the document, which flew away, carried by the wind and rain into the darkness, and lunged towards the pistol. But Lorato was faster, or at least she tried. She lunged onto the asphalt, scraping her knees, trying to reach the cold metal before the millionaire's wife. Her fingers brushed the grip. "No!" Yasmin shrieked. Furious at having lost the document, Yasmin unleashed a brutal kick to Lorato's ribs. The dull thud of the impact made Ikon close his eyes for a fraction of a second, feeling her pain as his own. Lorato let out a sharp groan and rolled on the ground, breathless, unable to reach the weapon. Yasmin picked up the pistol, stood up trembling, soaked, with her makeup running, making her look like a diabolical clown. Her hands trembled from adrenaline and the cold, which made her even more dangerous. "Ah!" Yasmin shrieked, pointing indiscriminately between Lorato and Ikon. "You ruined me. I lost the paper. Now I have to kill all of you and say it was a robbery gone wrong." Zola, cleaning his eyes with his sleeve, regained his blurry vision and ran close to Yasmin. "Give it to me!" He snatched the gun from her. "You don't have the guts. I'll do it." Zola walked towards Ikon. The barrel of the pistol gleamed under the light. He was 1 meter away, the perfect distance. But Zola didn't aim at Ikon. He aimed at the concrete bench, at the twins. "If the father suffers, he signs faster," Zola said with a sadistic smile. "Let's see what happens if I put a hole in one of the light-haired ones." Thabo and Sifo's crying had turned into a lacerating scream, an infantile plea that pierced the storm. Seeing the evil man pointing that black thing at them, the boys huddled together, trembling with pure terror. Lorato, on the ground, tried to get up. She clutched the side Yasmin had kicked, racked with agony. "No, not them, kill me!" she screamed, dragging herself through the mud towards Zola's boots, grabbing his ankle in a last desperate effort to stop him. "They're babies. Please, have mercy." Zola looked at her with disgust and shook her off with a dry kick to the shoulder, making her fall onto her back again. "Get out of here, trash." Zola raised the gun again, pointing it directly at Tabo's head. "Ikon, I'm going to count to 3. If you don't promise me everything tomorrow, I shoot." 1. The world slowed down for Ikon. He could see the raindrops falling in slow motion. He could see the terror in his children's eyes. He could see the despair and unconditional love on Lorato's face, sprawled in the mud, willing to die for children who weren't hers. And he could see Zola and Yasmin's stupid arrogance. They believed they were in control because they had a gun, but they forgot something basic. A weapon is only dangerous if the one holding it is faster than a father's fury. 2, Zola said, pressing his finger on the trigger. "Let go of my son, Zola." The voice didn't sound like that of a sick man. There were no coughs, weakness, or tremors. It was an order, a deep, resonant command, charged with such strong authority that it seemed to cut through the very rain. Zola stopped. The tone of voice was so unexpected, so dissonant with the image of the invalid, that his brain took a second to process it. He lowered the gun a few centimeters, confused, and looked at Ikon. And then, Yasmin saw it. She saw Ikon's leg muscles contracting under the wet fabric of his trousers. She knew that voice. It was the voice Ikon used in boardroom meetings before destroying a rival company. It was the voice of the shark. Ikon slowly lifted his head. Water streamed down his face, washing away the facade of weakness, revealing eyes that burned with a lethal fire. "And if you point that weapon at my children again, I will tear off your arm and beat you with it until you stop breathing." The silence that followed was sepulchral. Only the wind could be heard. Zola let out a nervous laugh, trying to regain control. "Wow, how scary." The vegetable learned to bark. "What are you going to hit me with? With your dead legs?" Zola raised the gun again, now pointing it at Ikon's face. "Shut up and die with dignity, you pathetic wretch." "Ikon," Yasmin whispered, recoiling a step. She had seen something. "Goodbye, Ikon," Zola said. But before he could shoot, the impossible happened. Ikon didn't try to roll the chair. Ikon didn't cover himself. Ikon exploded upwards. It was a movement so fast, so potent, and so violent that it seemed like a special effect. The wheelchair shot backward from the force of the impulse. Ikon stood up in a fraction of a second, closing the meter of distance that separated him from Zola like lightning. "What?" was the only thing Zola managed to scream. Ikon's right hand grabbed the barrel of the pistol, deflecting it upwards, just as it fired. Bang! The shot shattered the street lamp, plunging the scene into a gloom lit only by lightning. But the action didn't stop. With his left hand, Ikon grabbed Zola by the throat. The impact was brutal. Ikon lifted Zola from the ground, an 80 kilograms man, as if he were a rag doll, his feet dangling in the air as he choked. Yasmin let out a shriek of pure horror as she saw the paralytic turn into a titan of fury. Lerato, on the ground, covered her mouth with her hands, crying, but this time from relief. Ikon tightened his grip on Zola's throat, looking him directly in the eyes, while the other man struggled uselessly and dropped the weapon, which fell onto the asphalt with a metallic clatter. "I told you," Ikon growled, bringing his face close to Zola's, "not to touch my family." With a dry movement, Ikon flung Zola against the concrete structure of the bus stop. The blow was dry and forceful. Zola fell to the ground, groaning, unable to get up, completely neutralized by pain and shock. Ikon stood there under the storm, tall, powerful, implacable, and slowly turned to Yasmin. She was paralyzed, trembling uncontrollably, water streaming down her ruined designer dress. She looked at Ikon's legs, as if seeing a ghost. You walk," Yasmin stammered, recoiling until she hit the sports car. "You lied to me." Ikon took a step towards her, a firm, confident, heavy step. Then, another. "I lied," Ikon said with a terrifying calm. "You betrayed me. You sold your own child. You tried to rob me," he pointed at Lerato. "And you hit the only woman in this city who's worth anything." Ikon reached Yasmin, who fell to her knees, sobbing, not from remorse, but from the terror of knowing that her life of luxury had ended at that exact instant. "Ikon, my love. Wait, I can explain. Zola forced me. I love you." Yasmin began to plead, reaching towards him. Ikon looked down at her with the indifference of someone looking at an insect, but before replying, he turned away. His priority was not revenge, it was an attitude. He walked to Lerato, knelt in the mud, not caring about his suit, and helped her sit up. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice returning to its soft, human tone. Lerato nodded, crying, touching his arm to make sure it was real. "Sir, you walked. You saved us." "No, Lerato," Ikon said, wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "You saved us. Now let me finish this." Ikon stood up again and took his cell phone from his pocket, miraculously dry. He dialed a number. "Detective, this is Ikon Tonali. Yes, the rumor of my paralysis was exaggerated. I need patrol cars at my location. I have 2 assailants detained for attempted murder, fraud, and assault on minors. And call an ambulance." He hung up and looked at Yasmin and Zola, who was groaning on the ground. "Start praying," Ikon said, "because prison will be paradise compared to what my lawyers will do to you." Sirens wailed in the distance, approaching like a pack of hungry wolves through the storm. For Yasmin and Zola, they were the announcement of the end. For Lerato, they sounded like a celestial choir. They all went in the ambulance. Ikon, Lerato, and the twins headed towards Mediclinic Santon. As the vehicle pulled away from the rain and darkness, Ikon looked at Lerato. She was pale, injured, but she smiled, seeing the children safe. "Lerato," Ikon said, as the doctor wrapped his torso in bandages. "Rest now. Tomorrow, when we leave here, you will return home and you will enter through the front door, not as a domestic worker, but as its lady." Lerato looked at him, confused and emotional. "Sir, I don't want to be the lady of anything. I just want you and the boys to be well." "That's precisely why," he replied. "Because you are the only one who wants nothing. You are the one who deserves everything." The next morning dawned with a radiant sun, as if the previous night's storm had washed away the wickedness from the city. But inside the Sandhurst mansion, the atmosphere was funereal. Mandla, the head of security, walked nervously through the marble vestibule. He had tried to call Yasmin and Zola all night, but no one answered. Rumors said the police had been on the road, but there was no confirmation. They must have gone to celebrate and turned off their phones. One of the young security guards said, trying to calm himself. "The boss, the former boss, the invalid, surely died of cold or is in some shelter. We did what they asked. They'll give us the bonus, and that's it." At that moment, the large iron gate of the main entrance slowly opened. It wasn't Zola's sports car that entered. It was a black armored limousine, followed by 2 police vehicles. Mandla felt a knot in his stomach. The car stopped in front of the staircase. The driver ran to open the back door. First, the children descended, running and laughing with new clothes and toys in their hands. Then Lerato descended. She no longer wore the domestic worker's uniform. She wore a beautiful, simple, cream-colored dress that Econ had brought to the hospital. Although she walked with difficulty due to the bandages on her ribs, she held her head high, and finally, he descended. Mandla felt his legs buckle. Econ Tonali stepped out of the car, walking without a wheelchair, without a cane, in an impeccable tailored grey suit and dark glasses that concealed his eyes but not his expression of judgment. Econ climbed the staircase with firm steps. The security guards, the same ones who had carried him like a sack of potatoes the night before, instinctively recoiled, lowering their heads. "Good morning, Mandla," Econ said upon reaching the door, taking off his glasses. His eyes were two glaciers. "Sir Tonali," Mandla stammered, white as paper. "It's a miracle. You walk. We were so worried." Mam Yasmin said that. "Save the speech, Mandla." Econ entered the vestibule like a king reclaiming his throne. "I know exactly what you did, and I know for how much you did it. 30,000. That was the price of your loyalty." After 10 years of service, Econ walked to the center of the hall, where all the household staff had gathered. Cooks, gardeners, maids, all looked in astonishment at Lerato, who stood beside the boss, as an equal, not as a subordinate. "I want everyone to listen carefully," Econ announced, his voice echoing through the high walls. "Mam Yasmin and Mr. Zola Castillo are currently in pre-trial detention, accused of multiple serious crimes. They are no longer welcome in this house, nor in any of my businesses. If any of you have contact with them, you will be considered an accomplice." A murmur of shock swept through the room. "As for you, Mandla," Econ pointed at the former head of security and 3 of the guards, "you have 5 minutes to collect your personal belongings and leave my property." Mandla fell to his knees, crying, "Sir, please, I have children. They forced me. They said you were crazy." "You had a choice," Econ said, implacable. "You could have defended me. You could have called the police. You could have done the right thing, but you chose easy money." Econ approached Mandla and lowered his voice to a dangerous whisper. "You let my children be thrown into the rain in the middle of the night, that I will not forgive. Out." The police officers who had entered escorted the guards out of the mansion. Silence reigned again. Econ turned to the rest of the staff, who trembled with fear, expecting to be fired too. "The rest of you," Econ said, looking at the cooks who used to mock Lerato and the maids who made her work double. "I know many of you treated Lerato badly. I know you laughed at her. I know you called her names when I wasn't around." The women lowered their heads in shame. "Lerato," Econ said, turning to her, "you have the last word. They were cruel to you. If you want them to leave, they'll all go right now, and I'll hire a new team. You decide." All eyes turned to Lerato. She held the power of revenge in her hands. She could return every insult, every scorn. Lerato looked at the cooks, older women who needed their jobs. She looked at the young maids who only followed Yasmin's lead out of fear. "Sir Econ," Lerato said softly, "fear makes people do ugly things. They were afraid of Mam Yasmin. They're not bad people. They're fragile. If they promise to treat everyone with respect from now on, I think they deserve a second chance. You don't repay evil with evil." Econ smiled. It was the answer he expected, and yet the magnitude of her nobility surprised him. "You heard the lady?" Econ said. "Lady?" one of the maids asked, confused. "Yes," Econ affirmed, taking Lerato's hand in front of everyone. "As of today, Lerato is not a domestic worker. She is the general administrator of this house and the legal guardian of my children, and whoever disrespects her disrespects me. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Yes, ma'am Lerato," everyone replied in unison. "Excellent. Now, everyone to work. I want this house clean of any trace of Yasmin by noon. Burn her clothes, donate her shoes, I don't care. I don't want to see any photos." Econ led Lerato and the children to the main living room. They sat on the enormous sofa. Econ turned on the giant screen on the wall. "There's something else you need to see, Lerato. While we were at the hospital, my digital security team recovered this from Zola's office's hidden cameras. A grainy video appeared on the screen. Yasmin and Zola were seen toasting weeks ago. When the idiot signs, we send him to the old age home and sell the twins," Yasmin said from the screen. "I've already spoken with the buyer near the border. They pay R50,000 for each. They're light-haired, they're well-priced." Lerato brought her hands to her mouth, horrified. "My God, it was true. Everything was true." "Yes," Econ said, turning off the screen. "But there's something else you don't know. Something I discovered this morning reviewing Yasmin's files while you slept." Econ pulled out a folder. "Lerato, you told me you cared for the twins because you loved them, But you never told me why you came to work in this house 2 years ago, shortly after losing your own daughter. Lorato stiffened. Her face lost color. Sir, that's private. My little girl died at birth. I came here to forget, to give my love to other children. Are you sure she died? Econ asked with a strange intensity. They told me she was stillborn. They wouldn't let me see her. They said it was better that way. Lorato began to cry, remembering the trauma. Econ opened the folder. Yasmin used the same clandestine clinic for her arrangements as the community maternity ward where you gave birth. The records are cross-referenced, Lorato. Yasmin didn't have a baby she gave up for adoption. Yasmin was never pregnant 2 years ago. She faked the pregnancy with padding to trap me. I don't understand, Lorato whispered. But she needed a baby to show me when the time was right. So she paid the doctors at your maternity ward to tell you your daughter had died. The silence in the room was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Lorato stood up, trembling violently. What? What are you saying? Yasmin stole your daughter, brought her here, presented her as hers for a few weeks, but the girl didn't look like her. She was dark-haired like you. Yasmin was afraid I would suspect, so she got rid of her, sent her to an orphanage in the rural area. Econ pulled a photo from the folder, a current photo of a 2-year-old girl in an orphanage. She had Lorato's same large, expressive eyes. Your daughter is alive, Lorato, and I know where she is. The word alive floated in the charged air of the mansion, heavier than any jacaranda furniture, brighter than any crystal chandelier. Lorato looked at the photograph in Econ's hands, and the world around her began to spin vertiginously. Her knees buckled. Econ dropped the folder and caught her before she touched the floor. Lorato, breathe, he ordered, gently shaking her. She clung to his suit lapels, digging her fingers into the fabric, desperate. Her eyes searched his face for any sign that it was a lie, a mistake, anything, rather than a cruel hope that could kill her if it proved false. Don't play with me, sir. Don't play, she sobbed with a voice that tore at the soul. I saw. They told me she was gray, that she wasn't breathing. They lied to you, Lorato. Everyone lied to you for money. Econ spoke to her with fierce intensity, looking directly into her eyes to convey certainty. Yasmin paid the doctor, paid the nurse. She gave 10,000 to each to tell you your daughter had died and handed her over through the back door. She needed a baby urgently to pretend hers had been born prematurely. But when she saw that the girl had your features and not hers, she got scared. Econ signaled to the escort chief waiting at the door. Prepare the car and notify the helicopter pilot. We're going to Mathatha right now. Mathatha? Lorato asked, stunned. But that's far. In the helicopter, it's 40 minutes, Econ replied, helping her to her feet. Your daughter has waited 2 years. Today she sleeps at home. The flight was a blur of propellers and noise. Lorato, sitting opposite Econ in the leather cabin of the private helicopter, wasn't looking at the landscape. She pressed the girl's photo against her chest throughout the journey, praying in silence, promising God and all the saints that if this were true, she would give her whole life in gratitude. Econ, respecting her trance, said nothing but continued to watch her, ensuring that the anxiety didn't make her faint. They landed in a dusty field on the outskirts of the historic town. An armored truck was already waiting for them. The shelter, Hope's Cradle, was an ironic name for a grey brick building with peeling paint and rusty barred windows. The place smelled of dampness and boiled soup. When Econ entered, with his impeccable suit and aura of power, the place seemed to shrink. The director, a short, nervous woman named Mama Grace, came out of her office, wiping her hands on her skirt. Sir Tonali, it's an honor. We weren't expecting, the woman stammered, looking fearfully at the armed security guards flanking the entrance. I didn't come for a social visit. Mama Grace, Econ cut her off in an icy voice. I came for a girl, admitted 22 months ago with the name Maria N. She was brought by an intermediary from the capital. The woman paled. Sir, the records are confidential, and closed adoptions cannot be. Econ pulled a folded paper from his inner pocket. It wasn't a judicial warrant. It was something faster, a check. This is a donation to renovate this entire building, buy new beds, and quality food for all these children, for 5 years. He paused. Or I can call the premier of the province right now, who is my friend, and ask him to send a fiscal and sanitary audit here. I'm sure they'll find many irregularities. Econ put the check away and pulled out his cell phone. You choose, help or jail. The director swallowed audibly. Corridor 3, last room on the right. She paused. We named her Jade because she always smiles, even if no one visits her. Lorato waited no longer. Upon hearing the location, she ran. She forgot the pain in her ribs. She forgot protocol. She ran down the dark corridor, where the crying of several babies created a symphony of sadness. She reached the last door. It was ajar. Inside, in a room with 6 metal cribs, there was a small girl, about 2 years old, sitting on the floor on a worn rug, playing with a solitary wooden block. She had black, curly, tousled hair and wore a dress that was too big for her. Lorato stopped at the doorframe. Her breath hitched. Her heart pounded so hard her ears hurt. The girl looked up. She had huge, dark, deep eyes, the same eyes Lorato saw in the mirror every morning. She had a small, star-shaped birthmark on her neck, identical to Lorato's mother's. "Mama," the girl babbled, though she couldn't know who this woman was. Perhaps she called all women who entered that, hoping one might be. Lorato let out a muffled cry, a guttural sound of pure pain and love, and threw herself to her knees on the floor. "My love, my life, you're alive." The girl, initially startled by the cry, became quiet. Lorato approached, crawling, and enveloped her in her arms. The contact was electric. The girl smelled Lorato's scent, neutral soap and tears, and by a primary instinct that science cannot explain, she immediately relaxed. Her small hands clung to Lorato's neck. "Jade, my Jade," Lorato cried, kissing her face, her hands, her feet, checking that she was whole, that she was real. "Forgive me, my love. Forgive me for not knowing. Mama is here. Mama came for you." Ikon watched from the door, his eyes moist. He had closed deals worth billions, bought islands, won impossible lawsuits, but nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to the victory of seeing that mother reclaim the piece of soul that had been stolen from her. He approached slowly and knelt beside them. "Helena," he said softly, using the child's given name. "It's time to go. Thabo and Sifo are waiting for their little sister." Lorato looked up, her face bathed in tears, but with a smile that lit up the gloomy room. "Thank you," she whispered. "I owe you my life, sir." "You owe me nothing," he replied, stroking little Jade's head. "We are family, and family takes care of each other." The departure from the shelter was triumphant. Lorato carried Jade as if she were a solid gold trophy. The girl, clinging to her biological mother, looked at everything with curiosity, feeling safe for the first time in her short life. When they boarded the helicopter to return, Jade fell asleep in Lorato's lap in a matter of minutes. Ikon looked at Lorato across the cabin. "Tomorrow my lawyers will begin the process to change her name on the registry, and yours too, if you wish." "Mine?" Lorato asked. "Yes. I think Lorato Tonali sounds very good." Lorato blushed, lowering her gaze to her daughter. "Sir, don't say such things. I'm not saying it lightly. Yasmin signed the divorce months ago in a document she believed was a life insurance policy. Only my signature is missing. And when that woman is behind bars forever, I will need a partner, someone I trust blindly. Someone who loves my children, as if they were her own." Ikon held her gaze. "But before we think about the future, we need to close the past. There's one stop I need to make tomorrow, and I want you to come with me. I need her to see you. I need her to see that she didn't win." The sound of steel bars closing behind Ikon echoed like a cannon shot in the Pretoria Female Correctional Center. The corridor was long, lit by flickering fluorescent lights. The smell of cheap disinfectant and confined humanity was pervasive. Beside Ikon, Lorato walked with her head held high, wearing a navy blue power suit he had bought her. She no longer looked like the domestic worker. She looked like the lady of the world. Her daughter Jade was safe at home with the twins, and a trusted nanny supervised by 3 security guards. "The inmate refuses to eat," Sir Tonali informed the prison director, a stern woman unimpressed by famous surnames. "She says the food is rat poison and demands to speak with her lawyer every 5 minutes. But the lawyer resigned this morning when he saw the DNA evidence and the videos." "I'm not surprised," Ikon said without stopping. Yasmin always had a talent for alienating people. They reached the special visitation room. It wasn't the common area with phones and glass partitions. It was a small interrogation room with a metal table bolted to the floor and 3 chairs. Yasmin was already there, handcuffed to the table. The image was striking. The queen of society, the woman who spent fortunes on facial creams, was unrecognizable. She wore the standard gray uniform that hung loose and rough on her. Her blonde hair, always perfect, was greasy and tangled. Without makeup, her face showed a sickly pallor and deep dark circles that betrayed sleepless nights. Her nails, once long and sculpted, were broken. When the door opened and she saw Ikon enter, Her eyes lit up with a spark of delusional hope. "Econ, my love," she chirped, trying to get up, but the chains prevented her. "I knew you'd come. Get me out of here. It's a terrible mistake. Look what they've done to me. They forced me to take cold showers." Then, her gaze fell on Lorato, standing beside Akon. Yasmin's smile twisted into a grimace of pure hatred. "What is she doing here? You brought the domestic worker to see me like this? Is that it? Do you find it amusing to humiliate me?" Akon sat down opposite her with absolute calm. Lorato remained standing to his right, like a statue of justice. "Lorato is not here as a domestic worker, Yasmin," Akon said softly. "She is here as a victim and as a mother." Yasmin let out a nervous laugh. "Mother, please, don't come with the melodrama of the dead girl. She's not dead," Lorato interrupted. Her voice was firm, resonant. For the first time, she looked at Yasmin, not with fear, but with profound pity. "I found her, Yasmin. I found my Jade, in the shelter where you threw her, as if she were trash." Color drained from Yasmin's face. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. That was the piece of the puzzle she thought they would never find. Child abduction and falsification of medical documents were unbailable federal crimes. "We have the testimonies of the doctor, the nurse, and the shelter director," Akon continued, pulling out a copy of the medical record and placing it on the table. "Everyone sang, Yasmin. As soon as immunity was offered in exchange for your name, they tripped over each other to be the first to denounce you." Yasmin began to tremble. Tears, this time real, of pure terror, began to well up. "Akon, please," she pleaded, changing tactics. "I was afraid of losing you. I did everything for us. I wanted to give you a family." Akon leaned forward. "You betrayed me with my partner. You planned to steal everything from me. You tried to sell my children, and you stole the daughter of an innocent woman to cover your lies. There isn't a single atom of love in your body, Yasmin. You are a black hole." "Zola forced me," she shrieked. "He planned everything. I'm a victim of violence. He threatened me." Akon shook his head tiredly. "Zola says the opposite. And the house's security videos, where you laugh as you plan my demise, confirm his version." Akon stood up and signaled to the guard to open the door. "Wait, where are you going?" Yasmin screamed, pulling at the chains. "Don't leave me here. I won't survive here. Akon, I'm your wife." "Not anymore," he said. "My lawyer will bring the divorce papers tomorrow. You get nothing. The prenuptial clauses are clear in case of infidelity and serious crime. You don't get a cent." Akon paused at the door and looked at Lorato. She had a small, worn briefcase in her hand. "Ah, I almost forgot," Akon said. "Lorato brought something for you." Yasmin looked at the briefcase with confusion. "What is it? Money? Jewels?" Lorato stepped forward and placed the briefcase on the metal table. "It's the clothes you arrived at the mansion with 5 years ago, Ma'am Yasmin," Lorato said. "Sir Akon kept them in the attic. Ripped jeans, a cheap t-shirt, and worn sandals. It's what you came with, and it's all you'll leave with." Yasmin looked at the briefcase as if it contained a bomb. The metaphor was brutal. All her social ascension, all her luxuries erased in one stroke. She had returned to square one, but now with a 40-year sentence ahead. "Damn you!" Yasmin howled, completely losing her composure, throwing herself against the table. "I hate you. I hope you die, Lorato. You're a starving wretch. Always have been, and always will be." Akon opened the door and walked out into the corridor, followed by Lorato. Yasmin's screams echoed behind them, ricocheting off the concrete walls. "Akon, come back. Don't leave me. I'm scared." The guard closed the heavy metal door, silencing the screams at once. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound Akon had heard in years. They walked towards the exit, towards the daylight streaming into the main courtyard. Akon stopped before leaving and looked at Lorato. She was crying, but they were tears of liberation. "Are you okay?" he asked. Lorato nodded, wiping her eyes. "I feel sorry for her, sir. There's so much anger inside her that she'll never be able to be happy, not even if she had all the gold in the world. That's the difference between you and her, Lorato," Akon said, taking her hand and intertwining their fingers for the first time openly, without class or contractual barriers. "You have a heart that no gold in the world can buy, and that heart is the only thing I want in my life from now on." They stepped out into the daylight. The driver opened the limousine door. "To the house, Sir Tonali?" he asked. Akon looked at Lorato, then looked at the horizon. "Yes, to the house. We have 3 children waiting to go to the park." The car pulled away, leaving behind the grey prison and the woman who had confused value with price. As they drove away, Ekon knew that the real story hadn't ended. In fact, it had just begun. A story without lies, without fake wheelchairs, without masks. A story written by truth. 6 months had passed since the prison doors closed behind Yasmin. 6 months that, compared to the years of coldness and appearances before, seemed like a century of light. The Sandhurst mansion was no longer that mausoleum of cold marble, where silence was the norm and children's laughter was forbidden. Now, upon crossing the threshold, the first thing that greeted visitors was not the arrogance of a security guard, but the aroma of cinnamon, pine, and hot chocolate. It was Christmas Eve, the first true Christmas that house had seen in decades. In the grand hall, where Yasmin once hosted exclusive cocktails for people who hated each other, there was a gigantic Christmas tree decorated not with designer crystal ornaments, but with handmade decorations by 3 children: Thabo, Sifo, and little Jade. "Daddy, Daddy, look what Jade made," Thabo shouted, running across the Persian rug with a drawing in his hand. Ekon, sitting in his favorite armchair by the fireplace, put his book aside. He no longer wore stiff suits indoors. He wore a comfortable wool sweater and sweatpants. His face, once marked by stress and distrust, now had the soft lines of someone who smiles often. "Show me, champion." Ekon took the drawing. They were colorful scribbles, supposedly representing 5 people holding hands under a giant sun. "It's a work of art. We'll put it in the most important place in the house." "In the safe?" Sifo asked innocently, remembering where his father used to keep valuable things. Ekon let out a deep laugh and pulled the 2 boys into a hug. "No, son. Valuable things don't go into the safe anymore. They go on the fridge for us to see every day. The safe is for boring papers. This here is art." From the kitchen, Lerato observed the scene, leaning against the doorframe. Her transformation had been subtle but profound. She no longer wore the blue uniform with yellow gloves. She wore an elegant red velvet dress that enhanced her dark skin and black hair, now loose and shiny. Her hands, though manicured, remained the hands of a hard-working woman who didn't hesitate to knead bread or wipe a tear. She still sometimes felt like an intruder in that dream. The imposter syndrome attacked her at night. "Do I really deserve this? Me, the girl who came from a rural village in the Eastern Cape, with nothing." But then, Ekon would look at her, or Jade would run into her arms, shouting "Mama," and the doubts would dissipate like fog before the sun. "What are you thinking about, lady of the house?" Ekon's voice startled her from her thoughts. He had approached without her noticing, and now embraced her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. Lerato leaned against his chest, feeling the solidity of the man who had gone from an unreachable boss to a life partner. "I'm thinking that a year ago I was crying in my small servant's room, asking for a miracle," she confessed softly. "And I think of Yasmin, alone in that cell tonight." Ekon sighed, not with sadness, but with the resignation of someone who accepts justice. Yasmin chose her own path, Lerato. Every decision she made, every lie, every act of cruelty, was a brick in the cell she built for herself. Don't waste your light thinking about her darkness. Tonight is a night to celebrate. "You're right," she said, turning to look him in the eyes. "The guests are ready." That was Ekon's other great revolution. For Christmas dinner, he hadn't invited business partners, bankers, or politicians. The guests of honor were the new head of security, an honest man who had replaced the traitor Mandler, the cooks, the gardeners, and their families. Ekon had decided that no one would work that night serving him. That night, everyone would sit at the same table. Dinner was a wonderful chaos. There were toasts, anecdotes, and homemade food prepared by everyone. Ekon, the great magnate, took it upon himself to serve wine to the staff, a gesture worth more than any year-end bonus, although he had also given them generous bonuses. At the end of the night, when the children were already yawning and the staff had left with full hearts and hands laden with presents, Ekon took Lerato's hand. "Come with me for a moment," he whispered. "To the balcony." The night was cold, but the sky was clear, studded with stars that looked like diamonds scattered on black velvet. From the balcony, the city lights twinkled in the distance, oblivious and remote. Ekon leaned on the railing, looking at the horizon. "You know, for years I would stand here with a glass of whiskey in my hand, looking at those lights, and I felt like the poorest man in the world," Ekon said reflectively. "I had millions in the bank, yes, but I had no one to tell how my day had been. No one to cover me with a blanket if I got sick. I was surrounded by sharks waiting for me to bleed." He turned to Lerato, taking her hands in his. His eyes shone with an emotional intensity he rarely showed. "When I faked that accident, I was looking for the truth, but I found something much greater. I found you, Lorato. He paused, letting the words settle. You taught me that dignity is priceless, that loyalty cannot be bought, and that love is the only thing that saves us from ourselves. Lorato felt tears well up in her eyes. Ikon, you saved my daughter. You gave me a home. No, he interrupted her. You made us a family, and a family should have the same name. Ikon reached into his suit jacket pocket and pulled out a thick brown paper envelope. This arrived this afternoon. It's my Christmas present for you and for Jade. Lorato opened the envelope with trembling fingers, reading the heading of the legal document. Full adoption decree. Minor. Jade Tonali. Adoptive father. Akon Tonali. Lorato brought her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. Akon had legally adopted Jade. She was no longer just Lorato's daughter living in his house. She was his daughter before the law, with the same rights, the same inheritance, and the same surname as the twins. I wanted her to know when she grows up that she's not a guest, Ikon said. She's my daughter, and you are the mother of my 3 children. Lorato couldn't speak. She threw herself into his arms, crying with pure happiness, soaking his wool sweater. Akon held her tightly, burying his face in her hair, breathing in her scent of peace. But something is missing, he said, gently pulling away and wiping her tears with his thumbs. One last step for the team to be complete. Ikon stepped back, and right there, under the stars and the December cold, the man who never knelt before anyone bent one knee before the former domestic worker. He pulled out a small black velvet box. When he opened it, there wasn't an ostentatious, vulgar diamond, like the one he had given Yasmin. There was an elegant ring with a deep blue sapphire, surrounded by small, brilliant cut diamonds, classic and timeless. Lorato, I don't offer you a perfect life. I have my demons, I have my bad days, and I'm stubborn, but I offer you my entire life. I offer you my respect, my fidelity, and my love, until the last day I breathe. He paused, looking at her. Will you do me the infinite honor of marrying me and being the true lady of this house and this heart? Lorato looked at the ring, then looked at Ikon. In his eyes, she saw the reflection of everything they had been through together. The humiliation, the fear, the rain at the bus stop, the rescue at the shelter. Everything had led them to this precise moment. Yes, she said in a clear, strong voice. Yes, Ikon, yes, to everything, with you until the end of the world. Ikon slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood up and kissed her. It was a long, passionate kiss, a seal of promise between 2 souls who had found each other in the middle of the storm. At that moment, the glass door of the balcony burst open. Ew! They're kissing! Pedro shouted, covering his eyes. How gross, Thabo added, laughing. Kiss, kiss. Jade clapped, jumping. Ikon and Lorato separated, laughing. The 3 children ran towards them, in their pajamas, throwing themselves onto their legs in a chaotic and wonderful group hug. What are you doing awake, little ones? Ikon asked, carrying Jade in one arm and holding Thabo with the other. We heard a noise, Pedro said. Has Santa Claus arrived yet? Ikon looked at Lorato. Then he looked at his children and, finally, at the house full of light and warmth behind them. Yes, my children, Ikon said with the absolute certainty of a man who finally understood what life is about. Santa Claus has already arrived, and he brought the best gift of all. Toys? Jade asked hopefully. Something even better, princess, Ikon replied, looking at Lorato with adoration. He brought a future. Money can buy a house, but only love can build a home.